Today's daf we're going to be learning is Chullin, daf kuf yubet. Today we're going to deal with a lot of different kashrut issues, as we have been in this chapter, and we're going to see, I would say, 6 to 7 cases. There's really 6 in our daf, but we're going to go back and review the one from last time. So let's just call it 6 topics plus the one from yesterday. So let's start our topic, our daf today with the issue of this machloket Rav and Shmuel. I wanted to just clarify something that wasn't 100% clear to me yesterday, which is dagim sha'alu b'kara. We have fish, and this is the nat bar nat sugya, netinatam bar netinatam, where it's already more indirect, where we have fish that were hot, that went into a bowl where meat had been before, and the bowl had hot meat, it absorbed meat, and then the concern is the taste of the meat went into the fish, and can we eat that fish, right? That in and of itself is not a problem. Can we eat that fish with milchiks, okay, with something halavi? So we said, Rav said it was forbidden, Shmuel said it was permitted. Now, a few things that are interesting here. Number one, then we said that Rav, it was actually just inferred from a story, and in fact, the inference was incorrect. However, and this wasn't 100% clear to me yesterday, although it was pretty clear, but I was confused. It seems that even though the Gemara rejects and says, yeah, you can't really infer from that story, still Rav's position was to forbid it. Okay, so meaning in the end, it doesn't seem like it was really inferred from that story. Okay, it really Rav did forbid though, and Shmuel permitted it. Now, what did Shmuel permit? And this is interesting because the case is, and here we're going to talk about this a whole bunch of situations today, where there's a lot of things that the Gemara doesn't tell you. So it tells you a particular case, but it doesn't tell you a different case. So the question is, then things are open to interpretation. So what's the issue here? The issue is, what if you cooked, right? That's what we call dairy equipment. What if it was actually cooked in a meat pot? Okay, that's not dairy equipment, that's meat equipment. But like some things labeled kosher DE, dairy equipment, right? So you can't mix that with meat. But if, for example, let's say you cooked the fish in a pot that meat had been cooked in, would that have more flavor then? Because it's actually cooking. We know the cooking process, absorbs more flavor and then spits out more flavor. Would that be more of an issue to eat with a milk product? And that, in fact, is a machloket within our sugya, because our sugya doesn't talk about it. Our sugya is talking about the kli, the vessel where it wasn't on the fire, which might imply that if it was on the fire, it's a problem. So the way we hold there is that this combination shita, which is, since it's not 100% clear, so, because it's still indirect, right? You cook your pasta in a meat pot, and then you want to put Parmesan cheese on, right? So we actually hold that you can't put Parmesan cheese on because it was cooked in a meat pot. However, b'di'evet, if you already, post facto, if you already put the cheese on, then we don't make you throw out the pasta, okay? Because there's always the issue of we don't want to make you throw things out unless we're sure it's really a problem. So we're lenient there on that because it's not 100% clear from here. The other thing before we get started with our daf that I want to talk about is this food called kutach, okay? It's a thing that comes up a lot in the Gemara, and particularly in our sugya. And you'll see why in a minute. It has all sorts of ramifications for all sorts of halachic issues. The first thing is it was just a food the Babylonians ate, and in fact the ones in Israel make fun of the Bavliim that they eat this because it's kind of a gross food. It's got like moldy or stale bread in it, or breadcrumbs. It's got some milk or liquid from cheese in it, which also doesn't sound so pleasant, and it's got salt in it. Okay, now the relevance is the milk for the basar b'chalav. The salt, we're going to go back today also and talk about kutach relating to meliach hareu kirotech. If you're salting meat, and something gets into it, right? That's going to, when your milk gets in it, it's going to absorb the flavor because meliach hareu kirotech. It's as if it was boiled. So do we say the same thing with something that falls into kutach? It's going to come up later. And another big sugya where it comes up not in today's daf is chametz, because it has chametz in it. So it comes up in all these halachic sugyot. It was really like a dip that they would use, that they would dip their bread in, because it was a dip. So it wasn't like a food they actually ate as food, but they ate it as a dip. Okay, the next thing we talked about, and we're going to start with this topic, the tznon shechatachol b'sakin at the very bottom of Kuf Yud Aleph Amud Bet, the radish that you cut with a knife that was already used to cut meat, asur lo'achlo b'kutach, you can't eat it with milk because, this is topic number 1 for today, because we said hanemile tznon, this is only radishes. Why? Da'agav chorfe bala, because of the sharpness of the radish, it absorbs. Aval kishut, but cucumbers, garalebe psake va'afla. But if it's cucumbers, then we say it doesn't. You just have to clean off the surface. You just have to take off, rub down the surface of it, make sure if you got some meat on the cucumber, well, as long as you rub it off, that's enough. Okay, you peel away a little teeny bit, and that's fine because it's not sharp and it doesn't absorb the flavors from the knife. Kilche de lifta share, if you have stalks of turnips and you cut them with the knife, it's permitted because the assumption is the turnips have a very strong, but not strong, sharp, like onions and garlic and radishes, and we're going to see chard is in that category, and lemons are in that category. Okay, they absorb a lot. This actually has a strong flavor. They call it sweet matok. I don't know if it's exactly sweet, but the point is it has a strong flavor that overpowers the meat taste, and then you won't taste the meat at all. So much so you'll see in a minute something about it, which is desilka sire. If it's charred, it's forbidden, like Swiss chard. V'ipetach behu lifta shapir dami. But if you sliced the turnip and then sliced the chard, then it would be fine because the chard already, the turnip already overrides the taste of the meat. Now, some people say, so then you could cut with a turnip and then cut chard, cut more chard, and as much as you want after that. Some people say, no, it means if you want to do it alternating, turnip, chard, turnip, chard, turnip, chard. Every time you want to cut chard, first you have to cut it with a turnip, otherwise it's an issue. Okay, so that was topic number one, this cutting with the knife. Okay, there's this concept also, number one, of the sharpness of the item, and it's also the dukkha de sakina. It's the fact that you are using a knife to cut. The action of cutting actually brings out the flavor more. So the combination of that and the charifut, the sharpness of the item, brings out the meat flavor. Sugya number two. Can you put a jug of salt next to your jug of kutach? Now, what's the problem? Okay, salt is parv, so what if it's next to the kutach? Well, the problem is we're worried that some of the kutach might get into the salt, and later you're going to use the salt for salting your meat, and it's going to, maybe then you'll end up with milk in the meat, in the salt, which while you're doing the salting process, it's a problem. So Rav Dimi asked Rav Nachman, can I do this? Amrle asur. And Rav Nachman says, no, you absolutely can't. Dechalamai, he says, what about vinegar? Because vinegar was also used for soaking the meat. Okay, they would put it for seasoning the meat, or they would put the meat in vinegar. So you're worried about vinegar as well? Amrle shari. He said, no, that's permitted. Umayshna, what's the difference? To which Rav Nachman answers him, an answer that comes up in all sorts of places. I wonder if this is the source, because we'll see in a minute. When you go eat a core of salt, which is a huge amount of salt, you'll figure it out, okay, although there are some different interpretations of this, but he's sort of pushing him off and not really giving him an answer. But the Gemara tells us the reason. In other words, sort of saying, go figure it out yourself. You're a smart guy. My time is, so what's the reason? Hi iti isur ba'ene v'hai leiti isur ba'ene. Okay, the kutach in the salt, okay, if you have salt with kutach mixed in, the kutach, the flavor of the kutach, which has milk in it, is going to still be there. But in vinegar, the vinegar is very strong, it's going to overpower it and you won't taste it at all. So therefore, it's all about, right, giving flavor. If it doesn't have flavor of milk, then we don't really care. So the vinegar is not a problem, but the salt is a problem. So now we have this interesting thing. And here I want to jump to Tosfot for a quick minute. Tosfot further down on the page, the fact that you can't put this jug of kutach next to the jug of salt, because we're worried the milk is going to get in. Tosfot says, well, don't come to the wrong conclusion. Don't worry about putting in one box milk and meat next to each other, because this is actually worse than milk and meat next to each other. Okay, don't think like I can't put in my fridge a thing of milk next to a thing of meat because maybe the milk will spill onto the meat. Milk and meat, people are going to be very careful that it doesn't get on it, but specifically because the salt is parav, but yet it's going to be used with meat later. That's the problem. There we're worried that people won't be so careful because they'll forget that this is the salt that we're going to use to salt our meat. And when they go to salt the meat, they'll forget completely that some milk got mixed in because they won't even have paid attention. Who cares if the milk gets into the salt? Okay, so that's an interesting distinction to make. Okay, third sugya. Ha'u bar gozala, and this I may have mentioned up before. If we have a bird, dinafal lakada de kamche, falls into the kutach. Now, what's the issue? So we said, muliach hareu kirotech. So now is this piece of chicken that fell into your kutach, is it as if it got cooked, right? This wasn't cooking on a fire, it wasn't hot. So Shari Rav Chinina Berei de Rava mi Pashronia. So Rav Chinina, the son of Rava from Pashronia, said it's permitted. Amar Rava. Rava said, Man chakim lemishrei ki agav ne'ilav Rav Chinina Berei de Rava mi Pashronia. He says, wow, you need someone smart like this, right? Who's the smart, really smart guy that realized that we could permit this. Kasavar, he held, this is what we mentioned, ki Amar Shmuel maliach hareu karotech hanimi lehechade eino ne'echal machmat milcho. When Shmuel said maliach hareu karotech, what's he talking about? He's talking about when you salted it, when it can't be eaten because it's so salty. Like when you kosher meat, right? In the end, you're going to rinse off the salt. Okay, I did this. I prepared a dish the other day with a salmon. I made smoked salmon. So you put a ton of salt on, and then after it sits for a while, you rinse it off. So that's the kind of thing that a process happens. That's the whole thing. You're trying to create like a pickling type process. That's why maliach hareu korotech and kavush hareu k'mevushal, they're parallel, right? Because they're both, we're going through, something is happening to that. There's a process going on that's similar to cooking. That's when there's so much salt. If your kutach just has some salt in it, there's no process going on. So it has to be so much salt that you can't eat it because it's too salty. And therefore, right, aval hai kutra, this kutach can be eaten with its salt. In fact, that's why people put salt in to make it taste good. Chai aval tzli by klipa. Now this is also, by the way, the chicken fell in. The chicken was raw, but if the chicken had already been cooked, then it's already softer and it absorbs more. And then you would have to do what we call kedei klipa, to take off a little, like a thin layer. You have to cut off a thin layer because that did get, the kutach, the milk in it, and you have to at least take off that. V'it be pile, and if it had cracks in it, kule aser. Okay, then the whole thing is forbidden, right? This, some people think this is referring to the tzli. If it was roasted, then you have to take off klipa. If it had cuts in it and was roasted and then fell into this, the kutach, then the whole thing would be forbidden. V'mitalba b'tavlin kule aser. And if you put spices in it when you were cooking it, then it's all the more so soft, and even without the cracks, it's going to absorb all over, every part of the chicken is going to absorb, and the whole thing is going to be forbidden. Okay, so even though we said it's not forbidden, we do differentiate between certain cases where once it's roasted already, it's going to absorb things in, and then again, maybe just the surface, maybe more, right, depending on the situation. This reminded me of the kedei klipa, that I forgot to mention something about the radish. If we go back to that radish, when you cut that radish with a meat knife, so the duche de sakina, as we said, the force of the knife, that was the word I didn't say before, the force of the knife kind of causes the meat to come out, and the harifut, the strongness of the radish, causes the meat to get absorbed into it. Now, get absorbed into how much of it? That's a big debate. It's another thing that's not mentioned here in the Gemara, and there's a big debate among the Rishonim about this. The Rashba has the most extreme position. He says your entire radish becomes meat. It's completely meat. We assume the meat permeated the whole radish. Some people say the other extreme is kedei klipa. That's why I was thinking about it. Just a little bit. You have to cut off just a teeny, one, like just with a knife touch, that's where the meat is in. And other people say what we call kedei netila. Kedei netila is a finger's breadth. So you have to cut off it. We assume the meat permeates somewhat inside, but not all the way. So there's a three-way, a machloket about how much of this radish is actually meat. Okay, and then there's a question, what if I didn't cut off anything? I took this meat radish, that became meat because of that, and then I cooked it up with something. So again, if you take the Rashba's position, then you need shishim against the whole thing, right? Let's say I cooked it up with dairy. If there's, shishim against the whole radish, it would be needed. Or maybe just shishim against, kedei klipa, the just that little bit. Okay, so again, this has all sorts of ramifications. Okay, next topic. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Shmuel. Okay, let's just review. We did the slicing the radish versus slicing the cucumber. We had the kutach next to the salt or the vinegar, right? The distinction between being near salt and being near vinegar, and that extra distinction in Tosfot about, but you could put milk and meat next to each other without worrying. The chicken that fell into the kutach, and maliach hareu k'mevushal is not relevant here. And although there were some issues if it was roasted and cut into, chopped with slices in it and all that. Then we go to the next topic. Topic number 4. This is cutting meat on top of bread. Okay, we're going to talk about this in a minute, what we mean. Amar Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel. Rav Nachman says in the name of Shmuel, Kikar shechatach aleh basar. If you have a loaf of bread that you cut meat on it, like you cut the meat on top, and the meat, right, the juices from the meat drip into the bread. Asur la'ochla. You can't eat the bread. The bread is now blood-soaked. Okay, now, what are we talking about? So it seems we roasted this meat, and yet we still assume there's some blood in it. And when you cut, again, we get to this force of the knife. We'll see this later in the Gemara. They don't say it right now, but it seems that the force of the knife as you're cutting it might take out a little blood that's still left in the meat, and that's going to get into the bread, and now you have bread with blood in it, and that's a problem. Now, we're going to see, there's actually, well, we're not going to see this inside, but there's a machloket among the Rishonim here, whether it's really the blood we're worried about, or it's just a marit ayin issue. It looks like there's blood in the bread because the bread is now red and it came from the meat, and maybe it just looks like it, but there's not really actually blood in it. But it seems the mainstream position is there's actually blood in it, and even though you got rid of the blood when you roasted it, okay, this seems like maybe this is meat that you roasted without having salted it. Okay, maybe if you had salted it and then roasted it, then for sure. But here we're talking about you didn't salt it and you just roasted it. Most of the blood came out, but there could be some still in there. And if you cut it over the bread, that blood is going to come out. If you don't cut it, then the blood's not going to come out so much because in general, we're not so worried that the blood's going to drip out, but the force of the knife will push it out. V'hani mile da'asvik. Now this is only if the meat is red. Okay, if the meat's not so red, then it's not a problem. V'hani mile da'avre. And this is only if it passes, these are all sorts of qualifications, only if it passes through to the other side of the bread. There's so much in it that it comes out the other side. V'hanimile da'asmachei. And this is only if what comes out of the meat is thick, okay, viscous, aval klishta. But if it's very thin, leit lambad, then you don't have to worry about it because that's just juices, that's not blood. This already really minimizes the case because most of the stuff that's coming out of the meat is not going to be this thick substance. Shmuel, but when this happened, Shmuel shadilei lekalbe, he threw it to his dog because he wasn't willing to eat it, as we saw. Rav Huna yavle l'shamei. Rav Huna gave it to his shamash. Now, this is very strange because manavshach, either which way you look at it, this doesn't make any sense. Ishari, if it's permitted, l'kulei amashari, it should be permitted to everyone. Okay, now we're going to see this dissenting opinion, seemingly to Shmuel. Well, if he permits it, then, and he gave it to his shamash, obviously he thought it was okay, but why didn't he eat it himself? It should be permitted to everybody. And he aser, and if it's forbidden, l'kulei ama aser. How did he give it to his shamash? His steward, we're assuming, was Jewish. How could he have given it to him? It should be forbidden. To which they answer, no. Shane Rav Huna da'anina da'ati. He's what we call an istinis. He's very particular. He just thought it was gross. He wasn't willing to eat it, but he gave it to Shamash because he had no problem with this halachically. So here's the dissenting opinion to Shmuel. Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel. Okay, that's the end of that sugya. So that was sugya number 4. Now we're moving on to sugya number 5 out of 6 for today. So next sugya. Also Rav Nachman sorry, one second. Right, Rav Nachman in the name of Shmuel. Amar Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel. Ein menichim kli tachat havasal. Don't put a vessel under the meat while you're roasting it. Ad sheyichlek kol mar'eh ad mumit shebo. Until it's no longer red. When it doesn't look red anymore, then you don't have to worry about blood dripping down. But until then, if you remember, we want the fat to drip down. We want to eat the fat. We saw this in the sugya with the liver. We're going to see how this connects because then we said the liver blood floats and it's a problem. It'll be mixed up with the fat, but the meat sinks down. Now, right now, it doesn't seem like that's the case, so we're going to have to figure this out, because it says only at the later stage, when it's no longer red, and then you don't have to worry about the blood. So, Menayadina, how do we know when it's no longer red? He says, once the smoke starts coming out. Now, there's a debate here, what smoke? Some people say smoke from the meat, and that means already if there's no more blood, now the meat is smoking up. Some people say it's the coals start smoking up. In the beginning, when the blood goes on the coals, it doesn't smoke. When the blood's finished coming out, the fat starts dripping down, and that causes the smoke to rise from the coals, and that's the sign. So, debate about what exactly the sign it is, but at some point there's a sign that then you can start putting the vessel under the meat, collecting, and you're not worried about the blood. Matkefla Rav Ashi. Now Rav Ashi comes and says, wait a minute. Maybe the blood came out from the bottom part, but maybe there's still some in the top part of the meat. So Elam Rav Ashi, he says, le takanta, there's no way to fix this. Ela, but like this. Kind of funny thing to say. There's no way to fix it but like this, meaning there is a way to fix it. But meaning, I don't agree with Shmuel that you could just do it. But Ela mishtabe tarte glali milcha, put 2 chunks of salt, umeshafye. And then when you're taking out the fat, tilt it to the side and make sure that just the fat comes out and that the stuff at the bottom stays at the bottom. Now, this seems to match what we talked about earlier, that we're assuming the blood is going to go to the bottom, but here it sounds like because you put salt down there, and the salt is going to attract the blood and absorb the blood in it. Some people think, what chulam? So either both go down below, or maybe one goes on top. I'm not sure exactly how that works, and that pulls out the blood from the top part of the meat. Above it, I'm not exactly right. It wasn't exactly clear to me. I think it wasn't exactly clear to commentaries either. These 2 lumps and why 2? Okay, but maybe it just means a lot of salt, and then that will absorb the blood, and then you don't have to worry about it. But now we have a problem because, this was sugya number 5, but this actually contradicts sugya number 4. Because Amalei Rav Acha bered Rav Ika le Rav Ashi. So Acha, the son of Rav Ika, says to Rav Ashi, Mir Shmuel Hachi. Shmuel really say this. Wait a minute. Shmuel says once it doesn't look red anymore, we're not worried about any blood coming out, and therefore you're allowed to put the vessel underneath and collect the fat. But Harmar Shmuel, didn't he say Kikar shchatar aleh basar asur lochla? He just said that when you roast the meat, when it's finished roasting already, then we're still worried there's blood inside, and when you cut it over the bread, it's going to get absorbed in the bread. So there is still some blood in there. So why isn't he worried it's going to get into the vessel with the fat? But he is worried it's going to get into the bread. And this goes back to something I mentioned. Shanei hatam de agav duchke de sakina palit. Because there you're cutting it, and that brings us back again to the first sugya as well. As you're cutting it, the force of the knife is going to bring out. Now, there's some blood in there, but it's not going to come out by roasting it anymore. Once the main blood comes out, that's it. There's some that's still going to get stuck inside there. But it might come out when you slice it over the bread, and that's a problem. Okay. Last sugya for today. Amar Rav Nachman. Dagim ve'ofot shemelachan zeim ze asurim. If you take fish and a chicken and you salt them together in a bowl, it's forbidden. We don't yet understand why. Hechidami, what's the case? Now, what's the problem? The problem is the blood comes out because the salt draws out the blood. It's going to get absorbed into the other. But it's going to be similar to miman avshach as we had before, which is we don't really understand. Hechidami, if there's no hole in the vessel, then afilu ofof, and then what's the problem? So the salt draws out the blood gets absorbed into the other. Well, then why is it specifically fish and chicken? Also, chicken and chicken should be forbidden because it'll go out of one bird and into the other. If it's got perforated vessel, then all the blood should drip out the bottom, and afilu dagim v'ofot nami shari. Then fish and chicken should be permitted. So how do they explain it? Lo'olam b'kli menukav. It is a perforated vessel. V'dagim mishum de rafu karmayu kadmeu palte. This is going to go back to something we saw with the liver. That because the fish have softer skin, it actually, the blood comes out much quicker. What did we learn with the liver? As it's spitting out blood, it can't absorb blood. But once it's finished, it could. So in the beginning, it's going to be spitting out blood, but it's going to go much quicker than the rate of spitting out the blood of the birds. So ofot kamite, okay, they're more constricted and therefore or harder skinned. Batar denayche dagim palte ofot v'hadar balemine. After they've finished spitting out all the blood, the birds, right, the chicken is going to still be spitting out blood, and hadar balemine, and then the fish is going to absorb the blood from the chicken. And that's why specifically fish and chicken, but not chicken and chicken or fish and fish. Rav Mare bar Rachel, now we have this case where imlechle basar shchuta bahader basar trefa. We're now going to take this to a different situation. They salted kosher meat with non-kosher meat together in a vessel for Rav Mare bar Rachel. Ata l'kamei to Rabbah. So he came before Rabbah and said, "Can I eat this?" Amarle hatmeim le'asur tziran v'rotvam v'kifa shalahem. Now, before we get to this, I just want to say, based on what we saw, if they're spitting out the same rate, then there's really no problem because the blood that comes out of the non-kosher meat is not going to get absorbed by the kosher meat. However, comes Rav and he says, there's a pasuk, this is a bit of a weird pasuk to quote, we're talking about meat, and this is about shratzim, creepy crawlers, Ela hatmeim lachem b'chol hasheretz, so these are the non-kosher ones for you by the shratzim, right? They're also impure. But the point is, it says hatmeim. What do they say? Vatmeim. It's to include tziran v'rotvam v'kifa shalahem. It's their sauce, okay, the sear is like the brine that comes from them, the sauce, the rotev, and the kippah. This is the stuff that if you cook it up on the bottom of the pot, there's that burnt stuff at the bottom. So they're all forbidden. So what does he say here? It's not just the blood you're worried about. Now the blood doesn't get absorbed so easily. That we saw also the liver on top of the meat, that the blood kind of slips right off. Blood doesn't absorb so well. But the sear, the brine, and that stuff absorbs very easily. And that's the problem with this treif meat that's next to the treif, that's being salted next to the kosher meat. You're going to get the brine, the liquid that's going to come out of it, that thin liquid, which is going to get absorbed in the meat. And that's why he forbade it. So not the same as the fish and the bird, and it's the same in the end. One's going to forbid the other, but there it's because of the blood, and here it's because of the brine that comes out of it. Okay, and with that, we finish today's stuff. We're going to continue with that sugya a little bit more in the next stuff, but let's just do a quick review. We started with, we reviewed the sugya from last time about the fish, the not fish that was in the meat dish that then they wanted to eat with milk. Okay, that Shmuel actually permitted, even though Rav forbade, and the halacha is that we permit it, like Shmuel. Then we talked about the slicing with the radish and the sharp versus not sharp with a meat knife. Then we had the kutach next to the salt or the vinegar, and we're worried that the milk will get in, and then you'll use it to salt your meat. The chicken that fell into the kutach, okay, because of the salt. Oh, we're not really worried about the salt. It's not, right? If it's all cold, it's not a problem, although there were some qualifications there. We talked about cutting the meat on top of the bread, and the blood that was still stuck in the meat was going to come out into the bread, or it just looked like it did, even if it's not really. We talked about the vessel under the meat and the blood dripping down. So at a certain stage, Shmuel said it's fine after that. Rav Ashi said, you need a different solution. Right? He said that's not a good solution. The only way to fix it is really by, He said the only way to fix it is to put the salt inside, and that will absorb the blood and have it sink down. And then you'll be able to separate the top part, the fat off. And then we ended with the sugya about the fish and the birds that were salted together, as opposed, right? And then the meat and the non-kosher meat that was salted together, and that was a different problem. Both are forbidden, but for different reasons. With that, we finish for today. Wishing everyone a good day. Recording